All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Fernie Chamber of Commerce discussion around the critical topic of hiring foreign workers. Before I make some introductions and we get into the presentations today, I would like to acknowledge that we are virtually gathered this afternoon on the traditional homeland of people. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brad Parcell. I'm the Executive Director of the Fernie Chamber of Commerce. And we're really grateful this afternoon to be joined by the team at Perez McKenzie Immigration. So we have a few of the staff here, actually. Jenny, the Managing Director, also joined by Hernan, Caitlin, and Silvana. So it's great to have the PM Immigration team here.
And Gabe as well, Gabe Johnston.
Oh, okay, awesome. All right, great. So before I hand it over to Jenny to talk a bit about the state of immigration at the moment and all the different programs out there, I wanted to start us off with just a bit of an introduction around the issue of labor shortages as it pertains. So I'm just going to bring up a very quick slide deck here, and assuming everyone can see that, I'm looking at you, Kalina. Awesome. So today's session, like I said, is around hiring foreign workers and really getting into a discussion, like I said, with PM immigration, or what's going on with all the different immigration panels and things like that. So before we hand over, like I said, I just wanted to really sort of talk about the worker shortage issue in Fernie and really define it a little bit. I think we all in business here in Fernie, we live and breathe this every day. And, you know, certainly this isn't theoretical to me either. Many of you are the general manager of a really large accommodator in Fernie, and, you know, having to clean 40 rooms that are back to back on a Friday and only having 5 staff to do it. I've lived and breathed that world. And so we know it's a really, really critical issue. But earlier this year, we were able to, or late last year, we were able to actually survey the business community out there to really get some concrete data around what our labor shortage issue looks like. And so in late 2021, with the support of the Out Valley Economic Initiative, which is the Out Valley's economic development partnership, we surveyed some 318 businesses in the Fernie area. In the Out Valley area, I should say, and it was actually the largest business survey ever undertaken. 77% of those 318 businesses, or 245 businesses, identified as doing business in the community of Fernie, and those responses informed the 2022 Fernie breakdown of the Business Retention and Expansion Survey. If this is new to you and you don't know what I'm talking about, I'd really suggest heading over to www.theoutvalley.ca to download the reports. And there's some really, really interesting data in there around, you know, what we heard from our businesses as we were coming out of the pandemic. So in terms of the labor shortage issue in Fernie, it would be no surprise to most of you on this call, but lack of skilled staff was identified as the #1 major barrier for local businesses to expand or grow in Fernie. So above things that are really top of mind right now, like cost of doing business, you know, this staff issue is the #1 issue out there. 1 in every 2 businesses responding from Fernie to the survey stated that employee recruitment has been a problem in the last 3 years. And I have a little asterisk there because there's a direct correlation between the number of employees a business has and how much of a problem employee recruitment is. So the more employees a business has in Fernie, the more likely they were to respond that employment recruitment had been an issue. Of the businesses that identified recruitment as an issue, 69% of them stated that a lack of applicants was the underlying issue. So it's not necessarily that they can't find that, they just don't have any applicants to start with, and that's the #1 issue. So and then finally, 47% of responding Fernie businesses indicate that they expect their number of employees to increase over the next 3 years. So what that's telling us is if we do nothing about the labor shortage issue in Fernie today, it's only going to get worse over time, not better. So that was sort of responses from that survey. And what I wanted to move into now is just more of a quick overview of what's actually being done out there to deal with worker shortages. And there's 3 levels to this. There's the federal level, so the government of Canada. There's the provincial level with the BC government. And then there's activities that we're all engaging on at the local level. So I think it's really important to acknowledge some of the work that's going on out there and what's happening, outside of Fernie. So at the federal level, the Liberal government has been very, very clear that one of the pillars of their economic recovery coming out of the pandemic is immigration. And in February of this year, they updated their immigration levels plan for the next 3 years. And this is coming out of the Ministry of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. So they've set targets for permanent residents over the next 3 years. You can see there that it's slowly increasing from 431,000 this year to 447,000 next year to 451,000 in 2024. In 2021, there were 405,000 permanent residents who were arrived in Canada or got that designation in Canada, which was a record for our country. The other big piece that this immigration levels plan or the economic recovery plan talks about is how does the government modernize Canada's immigration system to fuel economic recovery and improve the client experience. And that's something we're really focused on at the Fernie Chamber. Many of you know I've been through the immigration system in Canada, New Zealand originally via Australia. I've had 2 working holiday visas plus went through the permanent residency process, and I'm now in line citizenship. So, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, there is a lot of friction in these systems. It could be a lot easier for folks, and so we're really looking at the government of Canada to make some movement there. Of course, the challenges at the federal level is that we're still working through a considerable backlog of immigration applications that were paused during the pandemic. At a tourism conference back in March, I heard the number 2 million thrown out there. So there were 2 million active applications still in queue, with 800,000 of those being permanent resident applications. And of course, the other issue we have around immigration as well is how do we ensure that new immigrants to Canada don't just end up in Toronto and Vancouver? How do we entice them or encourage them into rural communities, especially tourism-dependent communities like Fernie? So I wanted to throw up a little slide here that the federal government put out earlier this year, just sort of summarizing immigration in 2021, and there's some really interesting data here. As I mentioned, there was a record number of permanent residents, and I apologize if there's a little small for you to read on your screen. But immigration does account for basically 100% of Canada's labor force growth and about 80% of our overall population growth. Jumping down there, the federal government is predicting that by 2030, 5 million Canadians are set to retire, which will bring our worker to retiree ratio down to 3 to 1. And as it notes in the middle there, this is a very clear sign that we have a strong economic need for increased immigration in Canada. So just interesting things from the federal level. Moving into the provincial level, the province also has an economic recovery plan coming out of the pandemic. And one of the key pieces of that plan coming out of the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training is what they're calling a future ready skills plan. So this is the province developing basically a plan on how to address skill and talent shortages across all sectors of the economy. So the BC government has crunched their own numbers, and they're looking down the barrel of having 1 million job openings forecast over the next decade. And so with that coming, BC, must find new ways to build the skilled workforce we need to drive a strong, inclusive, and sustainable economy. And I wrote in brackets there and entry level, because quite often when we're talking about immigration, we're talking about skills training, attracting the right sort of skills into Canada for what we predict we need. But as we all know out there in Fernie or in tourism dependent communities like Fernie, it's also those entry-level workers, fresh out of school, fresh out of college, who power our restaurants, our hotels, and our tourism sector. And so while we're having these conversations at various levels of government, while the skilled piece is hyper important, that entry-level workforce piece is also critical to places like Fernie. I've just thrown a little note in the bottom there too, that while most immigration programs are fall under the purview of the federal government, there is one immigration program under the province called the Provincial Nominee Program. And there is an opportunity there for the BC government to prioritize workers to more tourism dependent communities like Fernie. Last week, I sat in on a webinar about this plan that the BC government has, and there was some really compelling slides, and I've just pulled 2 or 3 out just to show you in this presentation to really give you a flavor of what's happening, and that it's, it's certainly not just a Fernie problem at all. So I mentioned the 1 million jobs opening in BC across the next decade. You can see there the breakdown of how they project these jobs are going to be filled. So just under half of them, 49% of them, are going to be filled by youth entering the labor market over the next 10 years. About a third of those jobs, or 35%, are going to be filled by immigration from outside of Canada, so a significant chunk. And then a smaller chunk at 8% from interprovincial migration. And there are more people moving to BC than ever before at the moment as a result of the pandemic. But even with this projection, we're going to have 83,000 unfilled jobs by the end of the decade in British Columbia, even if these numbers hold true. So pretty startling case for immigration from that slide. Another thing I found really, really interesting, again, just to sort of combat the myth that this is just a Fernie problem, these are for the year 2020 job openings by region across the province. And so you can see that there's no section of the province that's not touched by labor shortages or impacted by this issue, including the Kootenays. And if you do a deep dive into the Kootenays, and this is all from the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training, there's some really, really interesting data here. And obviously this was a little bit skewed by the pandemic. But you can see the top employed industries in the Kootenays: wholesale retail trade, healthcare and social assistance, and then natural resources. So those are our 3 biggest industries in the Kootenay region. And they've also broken it out by top growth industries, including public administration, so schools, local governments, and things like that. What's of real concern for Fernie is the bottom employment growth industries in the Kootenays, which include really the industries that we're screaming out for in Fernie, which is accommodation and food services, building and support services, and of course transportation, which is almost non-existent in these parts. So pretty troubling data there in terms of some of the challenges we have in the Kootenay region specifically. So we've talked about the federal level, we've talked about the provincial level, and I guess lastly, just to talk at the local level, like what is happening in Fernie around the worker shortage. And the Fernie Chamber of Commerce has really been working this file for a number of years now, certainly the entire time I've been executive director. We launched a major workforce attraction effort in June of 2020, the Work in Fernie website. Which has been huge and the envy of a lot of resort communities around our province. To date, just with the nature of immigration and what's been happening with the pandemic, we've only really been marketing the site actively to Canadian audiences, and that's all about to change especially as we look forward to this new ski season, where we're really going to be ramping up our efforts in out of Canada markets, especially Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. So a lot of work going on still around Work in Fernie, a resource that continues to be built out and refined. We are adding an immigration section to the resources page of Work in Fernie in partnership with PM Immigration, so definitely keep a lookout for that as well. I mentioned these business retention and expansion surveys and reports that have just been done, and the Elk Valley one, which wraps up all 3 communities. One of the major recommendations coming out of that is the need for our region to do a really thorough labor market strategy to really start to appreciate who we're trying to attract from what sectors and what demographics to really inform some of our workforce attraction efforts. So I can definitely see that rolling out in the next year or 2. Of course, we're here today to really announce and talk off our partnership with PM Immigration, to help employees and employers with their workforce immigration needs. And the other big tool that we're trying to use a lot here in Fernie is being a really loud voice and advocacy to all levels of government, but particularly to the federal government through our membership with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and really trying to strongly advocate for more rural resort communities like Fernie. And the last point there on the local file is, we can't talk about workforce attraction without talking about housing. We know that housing is another major pillar of the Fernie Chamber of Commerce strategic plan. We continue to work that file. We just had a big information panel about this issue at our AGM. But labor and housing are symbiotic. We can't get too far down the road attracting a workforce without having places for them to live. So it's important that we acknowledge that when we're talking about workforce attraction here in Fernie. So once again, I just wanted to give a shout out to this resource that we have out there, workinfernie.com. There is money being spent right now actively promoting the website digitally to markets across Canada. So if you haven't put your summer job on workinfernie.com, we strongly encourage you to do that. It's quickly becoming the #1 hub for both employees and employers in the Valley. And like I said, we continue to build it out. We're also, on my last point, exploring what it might look like to have a housing board there with rentals available as well, to sort of make it more of a one-stop shop for people who are moving to Fernie, as well as the immigration section that I talked about earlier. So Work in Fernie, we now have a lot of data out of that website as well. And I just wanted to give you really quickly, before I hand over to Jenny, a bit of a flavor of what we're seeing on workinfernie.com. So as of the end of 2021, we were seeing over one job posted every single day. So 1.13 jobs on average per day. So 414 unique jobs posted on the website over the last year. We have 192 Fernie and area businesses that had an active account at the end of 2021. Reminder too that the site's really only 18 months old at this point, so there's been dramatic uptake in a really short amount of time. The industry or the sector that posted the most jobs on Work in Fernie in 2021 was food and beverage, which is probably not a huge surprise to most of us on the call. But closely followed by construction and trades. And, as we really try to move on our housing needs in Fernie, we're also realizing that the worker shortage is impacting the very businesses that build our housing. And so it's all connected, folks, and we need to look at it holistically. In 2021, the website had just over 67,500 views. And that, like I said, all with marketing only being done domestically in Canada. So as we start to open up that audience, expecting to see a lot more traffic on the website this year and in the future. So like I said, today we're really excited to really be putting Perez McKenzie immigration right at the forefront of our labor shortage efforts. We think there's a really amazing partnership here. We know the Whistler Chambers had great partnerships with immigration consultants. It's been very successful. And the way we're looking at the partnership is really in two major buckets, is, really having PM immigration. Sorry, folks, my phone never stops ringing. Really having PM immigration come on board to help Fernie Chamber member businesses and their employees with immigration advice and support. Obviously, with immigration programs, as you're about to hear from Jenny, there's really employee-led programs where the sort of employee takes the lead, and then there's more employer-led programs as well where the business takes the lead. And I think it's important as employers in Fernie that we're aware of both streams and how to support our employees through both. And obviously, the other way that PM Immigration is really going to help in this partnership is to really refine our advocacy efforts to the federal government. Jenny and her team work and breathe with these programs every single day. Their expertise and insights are going to be critical in terms of giving timely feedback to what's working and what's not working to the architects of these programs. So that's it for me. I want to park it there and give plenty of time to hand over to Perez McKenzie Immigration. But again, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. I also wanted to thank our community builder partners, Island Lake Lodge and the Fernie Fox Hotel, for sponsoring today's session. Without further ado, Jenny, I'm going to stop my screen share here and I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you very much for that insightful information. Even for us, it's great. Like all that data, and I'm glad that you are exploring already the options to market that website, that information with markets out of Canada, because that's where you're going to get a response. And we're going to talk about it, about which markets maybe make more sense, and then that could help the community in Fernie. And also for us, because when we run into potential candidates, we can redirect them to that website. And it's great that you see more than one posting a day, right? That's a lot of opportunity. Okay, so I'm going to share my computer screen. One second. Okay. Let's see. Bear with me. Okay. Where is this here? Is it okay now? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so as Brad said, we're here as a team. We are a team. Most of us are immigrants ourselves, so we have gone through the process. We have been here for a while now, but we are very committed to help others to transition to Canada and to make Canada their dream, as most of us made it happen. And we want to present this also as a team. So I'm going to start introducing you to Gabe Johnston, who is based out of Vancouver, and he will talk a little bit about COVID-19 and Canadian immigration. How has the most recent, and we have heard a lot about it already, but the most recent significant update.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, so I mean, we've gone through so many different iterations of restrictions and all this stuff in the border. Luckily now with vaccinations, government has reduced everything, as I'm sure many people are aware. So we definitely have more relaxed measures. You still have to be fully vaccinated. So for most, first world countries, that probably won't be an issue. For some third world countries, it still might be, or for countries where the vaccination that they're giving out isn't recognized by the Canadian government yet, that might also be an issue. So that is one thing to keep in mind when, if you do find an employee from, Russia or somewhere in Africa or somewhere else, you need to ensure that they're fully vaccinated with one of the approved vaccinations by Canada, which are, typical Pfizer, Moderna, Sinovac, stuff like that, Novavax. Some of those are accepted, and then some of the more obscure ones are not. So just to keep that in mind, as you do need to be fully vaccinated to come to Canada. And then we also have the no pre-departure testing now. So you can, they can come to Canada quickly, easily, it doesn't cost a lot of money. So yeah, it's fairly streamlined process now. And with the temporary residence applications, for people, in visa exempt countries, they can apply online before they come to Canada, or they can choose to apply at the border when arriving in Canada. So they still have that option for most work permits. There's still some where you need to submit them outside Canada, but they have that option. Otherwise, for countries where they need the visa, they can apply online, and then the processing times are pretty quick right now. For most countries, it's a little bit longer for some countries in Europe, especially due to the Ukrainian crisis. The application centers there are handling a lot of the Ukrainian applications. They're being prioritized. So the other applications are kind of on the back burner. They're still being processed. Usually it's in a couple weeks to a few months. But yeah, it varies depending on where your application is received, the applicant's country of residence, and their nationality. And then, yeah, for Ukrainians, obviously, the government has announced, widespread support for the Ukrainians. They can come to Canada. Their applications are, they're saying that they should be processed in 14 days. In our experience, it's been longer than that, just due to the sheer amount of applications they're receiving. But for Ukrainians to come, they can get a 10-year visa, which means they can go back and forth between Canada for the next 10 years. They're only allowed to stay here 3 years at a time. So you can, when they come to Canada, you can either apply for a work permit, a study permit at the border, whatever suits their needs best. So if you find any Ukrainian applicants, I know there's a lot in tech, especially. It's pretty easy for them to come, and then obviously with the government support, all their applications are going to be free, so they don't have to pay anything. So no hardships on their end.
Thank you, Gabe. So this is something that Brad has covered, and we are aware of the benefits to employers of attracting foreign workers and maybe embracing the immigration part a little bit more, as we have seen in different communities across Canada, when employers get, even in the consultations that we have, they participate because they can appreciate that foreign workers come very motivated and have the skills and education and are very hard workers to come to Canada and contribute. So long-term employees, because most of the alternatives that we're going to cover today involve the support of the employer in the application process to some or to a great extent. The work permits that they secure are typically tied to employers, and also most employees, we cannot say everybody, but they are committed to stay long-term, at least until the permanent residency is finalized, which can take between a year to 2 years approximately. And then, as Brad has covered, stimulates local economy and adds to Fernie's cultural diversity. Like if you, in any community now across BC, we're seeing more and more diversity. And even ourselves, when we have meetings, consultations with clients, we motivate them to consider the interior and not focus only on Vancouver or the big cities across Canada, but to explore also communities out of these big cities. So work permit options. So we're trying to keep this as simple as it can be. This is an overview of alternatives. This doesn't go very deep because we could be here all day, but many of you probably are already familiar with the temporary foreign worker program that covers the labor market impact assessment. And this is a very employer-driven option. You are taking charge of these applications. You are in charge of the recruitment efforts, of the cost of the application, the commitments tied to the applications, either transition plans or covering of the even the cost of transportation of coming to Canada, etc. There is a very demanding advertising that needs to be in place in different sources. If you have done this before, you may be familiar with it, but it's at least a month of advertising, and then employers need to demonstrate that there is an evident labor shortage. And if you need help of an immigration professional, yeah, there is an additional cost on top of the typical $1,000 cost of applying for an LMIA. But more than the cost, the financial cost of it, we can appreciate how time consuming these applications can be, with a level of uncertainty as to the outcome that takes place after a few months and after a very, very thorough interview that the government officers have with employers. That's why we always try to explore, and I may have said this before in another presentation, I believe last year, any alternative that does not require an LMIA or a labor market impact assessment. So that's the first step. And the options depend obviously on employee nationality, work experience as well can play a role depending on the type of work permits. And when we talk about LMI exemptions, well, you know, many of you have come to, or some of you have come to Canada and working holiday visas under the international experience class. That's the first thing that we all should look at. But then we need to look at the free trade agreements, like the North American Free Trade Agreement, now known as CUSMA, and other trade agreements with other countries like Peru, that's where I'm from, Colombia, Australia. And then if we move towards a kind of combo alternative that is not only for work permit purposes, but also that gives the option for permanent residency is the very dear BCPMP that we feel as a team very lucky to be in this province where there is an office that is very supportive to employers, because the BCPMP has a mindset of helping employers in need, helping small businesses that are facing challenges. Versus you can see the team taking care of the LMI applications has the mindset of protecting the Canadian labor market, which is fine, but it can be a bit tougher to deal with versus dealing with the BCPMP. And as I said, the BCPMP is more like a full package option where it's not only about a work permit, but the candidate also secures permanent residency. So it's a win-win situation for both employers and the candidates and the families, because, and also I should add that this option is typically led by the potential employee. So it's not only friendly in terms of the amount of time that employers need to allocate to help the candidate, but also the cost most of the time are absorbed by the employee or the potential employee. And so we wanted to give you an overview of LMIs because there have been some changes that maybe some of you already are aware of. And Hernan, my colleague Hernan, also a consultant, will talk a little bit about it.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Thank you everybody for joining us in the presentation. I would like to apologize in advance. I'm going through a cold, so my voice is not probably the clearest possible, but I'll do my best, and let me know if you don't understand something. Yes, so as Jenny was mentioning just now, the labor market impact assessment option is potentially one of the least popular options among employers, because this is basically driven entirely by the employer, and entirely I mean this phase of the application. The applications of LMIAs are done through a different department at the government. It's not the normal IRCC or like Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada that we're all, or most applicants are familiar with. This is done through Employer Development and Services Canada, which is ESDC. It's a different department, and obviously they have like different requirements as well. One of the things that are really important of LMIAs is that it's a two-phase process. So like the employer first needs to do the advertising and fulfill all the requirements to get the approval of that LMIA, and only then, when the LMIA is approved, that certificate of approval of the LMIA will be used by the foreign national to apply for a work permit. And that work permit is going to be an employer-specific work permit, not only because the person, the foreign national, will be working for that employer, but also because the position is going to be specific. So throughout the pandemic, this particular stream of immigration, of getting a temporary residence through the LMIA, sort of like suffered because of different aspects that we're going to be talking about now, but it wasn't very popular. And there were some things that affected them more than others. So after pretty much 2 years of the pandemic, ESDC, the department in the government, they decided to apply some changes that actually took place on April the 30th. And they aim to help to sort of like relax some of the requirements that they had in place before, so that this can make life easier for employers, specifically for some regions in Canada where unemployment was like rather higher than in other places. So one of the most important changes that took place on April the 30th was that like originally all like low wage positions, I would say like there are different streams within the LMIAs. One of them is low wage positions, which is for employers who are offering job offers to foreign nationals who are below a certain amount of money. So for those streams, there is what we call a cap. So there is a specific number of foreign nationals that can be hired from that specific employer. Like historically, that was always at 10%. However, since this changes happened in April the 30th, as I said, for some specific areas, that cap went from 10% to 30%, which includes the accommodation and hospitality and also food services industries, which is a great news for specifically those 7 industries in general, but particularly for accommodation and hospitality, since this means for employers that instead of out of, let's say, 10 for employees, they used to only be able to hire 1 foreign national. Now that increases to 3. So it gives like a little bit more flexibility in terms of like what kind of employees they want to hire, because sometimes foreign nationals are the ones that have the specific skills that they need in their businesses. And for the rest of businesses, that was moved permanently for now to 20%. So that is, again, like some flexibility added to the requirements of the program. The second point is that, like historically as well, LMIAs were always given for 6 months. What I mean by this is that once the LMIA certificate is approved, it has a validity on the document, which is the time that the foreign national has to use that LMIA certificate to apply for work permit, excuse me. As I said, 6 months historically, but then during the pandemic, that was raised a little bit to, offer some flexibility as well to foreign nationals to 9 months, and now they will be valid for 18 months. So from the moment that the LMIA is approved until that foreign national can gather all the documentation and all the different pieces to have the work permit application put together, they have 18 months, which again, this may not be a huge issue for some countries which have visa-free requirements, for example, because they can always use that LMIA and apply at the border entering Canada. But for some other applicants from other countries, like the requirements, not only that they have a visa required application that they need to fulfill abroad, like outside Canada in a visa office abroad, but also the requirements can be quite hefty, quite complicated. So they would definitely require more time to have those things processed, especially since processing times are longer anyways, since COVID and since all these issues that we're having around the world with Afghanistan and Ukraine as well. The third point is one that particularly affected some regions, and in BC we had like firsthand experiences of dealing with this, particularly in the Kootenays. So for low wage positions, again, historically, when there was an unemployment rate of 6% or higher, ESTC would refuse to process any LMIA applications that you were submitting. So that basically put a no. It was like a forbidden case. Like you could not have an LMIA process. Not even, I mean, like it didn't matter whether you submitted it or not, even though you did it and you did all the advertising and everything, ESTC would not process it. And obviously, throughout the pandemic, the unemployment rate in some regions, the Kootenays being one example, was higher than 6%. So some employers, even though they had the need and they had the resources probably to hire a foreign worker through this program, they would not still be able to. That was actually removed. So now that requirement doesn't exist, and it doesn't matter what unemployment rate there is in the region, they would still be able to submit an LMIA and have it processed by ESTC. And Jenny, if you can move to the next slide, if you don't mind. Oh, there we go. And these other two are probably not as, like we don't deal with this kind of cases, on a regular basis, but specifically for another stream in the LMIAs, which are like seasonal industries. Normally, the maximum duration of the positions was at 6 months or 180 days, and that was increased to 270 days per year. And lastly, for high wage and the global talent streams, again, two other specific streams of the program, of the temporary foreign worker program and LMIAs, the validity was moved from 2 years to 3 years. So yeah, those are the updates of the LMIA program so far.
Thank you very much, Hernan. Thank you.
Welcome.
So regarding LMI exemptions, as I mentioned before, the International Experience Class, most popularly known as IEC, facilitates work permits, open work permits, or young professional permits between 1 to 2 years. In some cases, like Italy, still 6 months, but that's hopefully going to change soon. But I know maybe some employers have already been familiar with a young professional permit that is a straightforward application that requires the payment of an employer compliance fee, no advertising though, but the work permit will be restricted to the employer. So this is a popular one among employers, simplest and cheapest work permits. Then, as mentioned before as well, the free trade agreements, some of them categorize them or separate the type of occupations that they target, like between technicians and professionals. And depending on the trade agreement, the work permits would be issued between a year or whatever the job offer is. It can be even less than a year, and up to 3 years. And some examples: CUSMA, Canada-US Mexico Agreement, previously known as NAFTA, is very popular for our candidates in the US. The number is growing and growing in the past 2.5 years, and also Mexican applicants. CPTPP, comprehensive, that stands for, and please help me, Gabe, Hernan, Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's the right guy. So that's the abbreviation for CPTPP, is how we know this work permit. Also now growing more and more popular among Australian citizens that are part of our market, and also now Japanese citizens and Mexicans as well. And also there are other free trade agreements with Chile, Peru, Colombia, that are very occupational specific and need to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And then we have CETA as well, which is not as straightforward as the other ones, in my opinion. And then we have the popular Francophone mobility work permit, with a lot of flexibility, in terms of the duration of the work permit. And this is to help speakers of French to settle outside Quebec. Doesn't make that much sense, but it's great. We love this option. It's also very friendly to employers and to candidates as well. And these applications have been successful not only online, but also at the port of entry. BCPMP, some of you may have already dealt with the BCPMP when supporting potential workers to settle in the community. As I mentioned before, this is a very friendly and approachable government office, and they announced some changes, actually many changes just a couple of months ago. And basically they made it a bit more flexible to apply as skilled workers, because the 2 years of work experience that was required before is not related to the job offer. So it could be 2 years of any skilled work experience. However, for points, because in immigration, points are always around, the related work experience helps towards points. And the processing times, depending on if it's a tech candidate or non-tech, could be between a few weeks to up to 3 months. And maybe Gabe, you can continue presenting here. Hey, Gabe, are you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, tech specifically, it's not a separate stream. Some people can get confused whether it's they can't find the application for it, but it's all dependent on just the NOC codes, the occupational codes. And in our experience, these applications are extremely quick. They're prioritized by the BCPMP. They take maybe about 2 weeks to maybe like a month for processing. So it's an extremely fast option, when the rest of the applications through the BCPMP take about 3 months, maybe even a little bit more now. Yeah, it's a great option for anybody who's looking for programmers, software engineers, technical sales even. These are all considered under tech. There's 29 different occupations that go with that. One of the big ones, entry level. So for your hotels, your food and beverage, stuff like that. So the low level occupations such as, front off or like cashiers, servers, baristas, stuff like that. You just need 9 months experience with your current employer. So most of our applicants in these categories, they come through the international experience class. That's how they get their work permit. And then they begin working with the hotel or the restaurant, etc. And then they complete their 9 months experience, and then they're eligible to apply through the BCPMP. With this program, you have to have completed high school. So that is a requirement of this program. For some other countries, you know, Australia, you can get a leaving certificate, maybe grade 10 or 11. In our experience, that still worked, but it is up to the discretion of the officer. And then with that, the payments and minimum income are important. So you have to make at least, I think it's around $23,000 a year. You have to have a job offer and make that much money per year. Otherwise, you're not eligible. International graduates for graduates of Canadian institutions within the last 3 years. So this, you've graduated from Canadian University, you have a skilled job offer, and you can apply through international graduate. You don't need work experience. There's no work experience requirement for this stream. So it's a little bit more favorable. In the past, the points requirements were lower. From what we've seen recently, that hasn't been the case as much. It's been about the same. It does fluctuate depending on on how many applicants there are, but it's been a little bit more favorable than just the standard skilled worker stream. One of the more interesting parts of this is the international postgraduate, where applicants who have graduated from specific programs in BC, which are like master's or PhD programs, they don't even need to apply or don't even need to be invited in the BCPMP. They can immediately submit an application, and they also don't need a job offer. So they can just go directly through the application and proceed to permanent residency. And finally, health authority. I know a lot of hospitals in the interior are looking for workers. So anybody who has a job offer from a BC Public Health Authority, Interior Health, and they work in a healthcare position, they can apply through this. Again, they don't need an invitation to apply. They don't need to worry about points or anything like that. They just submit an application, and then within 3 months or less, they should receive a nomination.
Thank you, Gabe. So as you can see here, as an employer, you can start thinking, okay, who can maybe use the entry-level semi-skilled worker path to not only transition to residency, but also to secure a new 2-year work permit. And this 2-year work permit will be restricted to the employer, right? Maybe this is an opportunity to also maintain in your radar the international graduates, right? Those students that are about to graduate or that have graduated already, because they have some flexibility in terms of how to transition to residency and also to extend their permits as part of the process. And now the new health authority, right? These targeted occupations, we find that are in response to very bad labor shortages in not only in health, but also in education. So we are seeing higher, we're seeing more clients not only from the health industry coming to us, but also in the education sector, like early childhood care assistants that are transitioning and that are benefiting from these new targeted draws with very low points requirement. So that's great from the BCPMP. And then employer eligibility. So if you're in Fernie, the employer, and this is very, very important, the employer, in order to support an applicant to go through the BCPMP, the employer must have at least 3 full-time employees on payroll or part-time equivalent on payroll. And the employer needs to be in operation for at least a year and in good standing. If the candidate is not working already for you, then there is a requirement of 2 weeks advertising before the job offer takes place and is signed. And the most important thing is some candidates come to us, some workers saying, yeah, I want to do the BCPMP. So the first step is, well, you need to secure the support of your employer, because even though the employer doesn't lead this project the applicant does, still the employer is critical because this is a joint application between the employer and the employee. And the only cost for the employer compared to the LMI process is a $230 employer compliance fee through their employer portal. In case the applicant needs a work permit. And those work permits, as mentioned before, are for 2 years and restricted to the employer. So again, targeted draws since March 10, 2022, especially not only for tech candidates, but also for occupations in the health and education sectors. And these are examples of the new entry-level occupations in the health sector. Some examples of the occupations that are target in the tech industry, and some examples, more examples there, and then childcare, as I already mentioned. And vets, I love vets. Yeah, I almost forgot about veterinary technician. Okay, so our process, I wanted to share this with you. After many years working in immigration, we have identified that a consultation is a requirement in order to help employees and employers properly. When we receive emails about, very quick emails about this or that, or even if the emails or the messages are provide a lot of information, through trial and error, we're convinced and that a proper consultation needs to take place to make sure we don't miss anything, because details are extremely important in the immigration process. So we need to understand the situation, not from your perspective, the employee perspective, 100% before we can provide proper recommendations. Then we, after the consultation, we provide not only a summary of the conclusions, but then potential action plans for your consideration. And then you can go ahead and go for the application, doing it yourself, or if you wish, we can represent you in the process from start to finish. We will take care of all the steps required. And if candidates come to our employees, we guide them a lot of, with a strategy that can change over time, especially in these unique times. We find that some candidates think they have this one option, but then during the process, there could be two options or two paths to take into account or decide between two to transition to residency. And as part of the process, there's a lot of documentation gathering. And as I said at the beginning, we work as a team. So it's more than one set of eyes that review these applications. And even in the consultations, it's not just me. Most of the time, it will be another consultant or another member of the team participating to make the process as efficient as possible for our clients that are employers or employees. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny, for that. That's a lot of great information. And yeah, it's really good to see immigration slowly getting back on its feet post-pandemic. So that's awesome. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I would encourage anybody who's watching live, if they want to do that, to throw that in the chat. And Jenny, I'm going to hand it back to you because I believe you wanted to make a bit of an introduction before we get into questions.
Yes, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce, I know all of you already know Caitlin Bates. Caitlin is a new member of the Perez McKenzie immigration team. We met many years ago, right, Caitlin, in the immigration process. and Caitlin, we remain in touch, and then here we are. Caitlin is gonna tell you what she's doing now, not only being a full-time mom, but what she's doing besides that. And we are looking forward for Caitlin to join us full-time sooner than later. In the meantime, she is on a project basis because she's very busy between studies and mom duties.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I'm super excited to be joining the Perez McKenzie team. As Jenny said, we've known each other for a number of years. I have a similar background to Brad in that, I really understand the difficulties that a lot of employers in this community face because, I've been a part of that as well. And I've also been through the immigration process myself. So I'm really excited to be working with Jenny and the team. As she mentioned, I'm currently studying through Queen's University. I'm almost halfway through, and I'm hoping that I'll be fully qualified and ready to start full-time with Jenny early next year. And yeah, obviously, as Jenny mentioned, I'm on maternity leave as well. So busy times, but I'm really enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to working with a lot of you. I already recognize a lot of the names on the chat today. And if you do want to reach out and have a quick chat with me, I am available and happy to do that. And I can help connect you with Jenny and the team. So yeah, just reach out. My email is caitlin@pmimmigration.com. Otherwise, you can always go through Brad if you want to get my contact details.
Thank you, Kaylin. We are so excited
Thank you.
to have you.
Yeah,
Yes.
me too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Caitlin. And I can't tell you, as someone who's been pushing this worker shortage wheelbarrow for a number of years now in Fernie, how impactful it's going to be to have an immigration consultant actually based here on the ground in Fernie. I think it's definitely going to be a bit of a game changer. So looking forward to that, and all the best with your studies in the meantime. So I still don't see any questions in the chat, but I really did want to reiterate, what Jenny hit on earlier is, if you're not sure, it's not easy. There's a reason Caitlin's going to school for a year to get on top of all of this stuff. But there's a lot of different ins and outs to immigration. It's a constantly evolving landscape, and so if you have employees that you want to keep, or if you're looking to attract foreign workers, I definitely recommend booking a consultation as sort of your first point of contact, and then sort of going from there. Jenny, you touched on it a bunch of times in your presentation, but just to sort of pull it out, because this is kind of how business people think, is everyone wants workers yesterday. So if time is of the essence, which it is for a lot of folks on this call, it sounds overwhelmingly that the provincial nominee program, provided that you meet all the criteria and all those sort of things, is probably the best way forward for an employer. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and but that situation can change because I don't know if you are aware, but the federal government has been impacted by everything that is going on, well, with in the international scope. So that has affected their ability to deal with backlogs, and they needed to stop invitations to candidates in express entry. So that happened, unfortunately, in September to Canadian Experience class and candidates, and also it had already happened to federal skilled workers due to travel restrictions in December 2020. So unfortunately, the unexpected pause on invitations to Canadian Experience class candidates created the tsunami or increase in demand for the BCPMP has created that in the past 7 months or 8 months. So the logic consequence has been an increase in the points required for candidates to go through the BCPMP. And there are other factors as well, but I would say that's the main one. And not everybody, a lot of people that were able to do express entry on their own, they found themselves that they couldn't do it anymore. So they went to the employers and said, let's do BCPMP, even though before they shouldn't have needed BCPMP. So that has affected a lot of people that were relying on doing BCPMP. And just to give you an example, in the skilled worker in the skilled worker category, I think it was November, that candidates needed only about 86 points to be invited to apply in the BCPMP pool. Now they need 109 points. And even it's a huge jump in the scope of things. So it's that has cause frustration to many people that were hoping to use the BCPMP in the past 6 months, especially, but we hope that this is gonna change. So there are a lot of ups and downs in immigration. We're still dealing with this. It's not over. I think it's just the dynamics of immigration, and that's why any options require a lot of, they need to be looked at now even more thoroughly, like to see what can be done. And more employers, as a consequence, are looking into submitting labor market impact assessment applications. They are more open to it, considering that the rules are a little bit more flexible now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are great insights, and that's really interesting. I guess there's like again, just to reiterate my point, there's probably a lot of benefit in consulting with a professional, especially with the environment out there right now. It seems pretty dynamic. It's been touched on a few times this afternoon, and before we wrap up, I'm just curious, from someone working in the industry, there is this kind of backlog. Various programs have been paused or completely reshaped to meet emerging sort of needs. Do you get a sense of when the immigration sort of whole system may settle down a little bit and clear out some of that backlog and get to normal? Do you think it's still going to be quite a while yet?
Hi, Brad. We have been hoping for that. I think we thought December, January, we were hoping that was going to be the case, but then the war started and made things even more, added complexity to everything again. And however, there are some signs, I don't know how reliable they are, that maybe this summer, maybe in July, there has been the government is working very hard to catch up. So we're hoping that in July, there are going to be some new developments in express entry that should have beneficial impact to the BCP, in the BCPMP and the points and all that, making it less stressful, because a lot of people, employees, families are still coming to us in a very stressful situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's hope that they get on top of that. I'm certainly looking forward to getting my citizenship through and finishing my immigration journey. I am in that queue.
I'm sure you're eligible. Please just get it done.
Yeah,
you will not regret that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Jenny, Caitlin, and the entire Perez McKenzie immigration team. This has been really valuable, and we have recorded this session and we'll make it available to our members. And, hopefully together with this new partnership, we can really, like I said, refine our advocacy and really get some support around employers and employees in Fernie who are looking to use immigration as a tool to get out of this worker shortage. And as we touched on at the start, it really is the main tool we should all be focused on. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I know it's an incredibly busy time as we come into the summer season, so I'll let everyone go and give you 24 minutes of your day back. But thank you so much, Jenny. And again, strongly encourage everyone to reach out to PM Immigration. They're doing great work on our behalf. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Take care.